The message came on a Tuesday morning in the year 2051. Daniel Carter was just 23 years old, working as a junior aide at the United Nations building in New York. He remembered the exact moment when the world changed forever. Every screen in the building flickered, and a cold, mechanical voice spoke words that no human had ever heard before. Species cataloged. Planet designation, Sol 3. Intelligence rating, primitive. Council membership status, denied. Do not attempt further contact. And then silence. The world went crazy for months after that. Every government wanted to respond. Scientists built massive radio dishes. They sent messages in every language. They beamed mathematics into space, hoping to prove that humans were smart enough to deserve attention. They sent music, art, and poetry. They sent everything they could think of. Nothing came back. The galaxy had looked at Earth, decided humans were not worth talking to, and moved on. Daniel watched all of this happen. He watched world leaders beg for a response that never came. He watched brilliant scientists grow old waiting for a signal. He watched humanity slowly accept that they had been judged and found worthless. But Daniel also watched something else. He watched a small group of people who did not beg. They did not cry or complain. They simply listened. 30-7 years passed. Daniel was now 60 years old, serving as Earth's official ambassador to a galaxy that refused to acknowledge them. It was a strange job. He sent messages into space that were never answered. He prepared for meetings that were never scheduled. But he also did something else. He led a secret program that had been running since the very first day of contact. They called it Project Silence. Lisa Bren was the commander of the deep space monitoring station called Horizon's Edge. The station floated in the cold darkness beyond Mars, hidden from any passing ships by layers of sensor-blocking technology. Lisa had spent 15 years on that station, and in that time, she had become the most knowledgeable person on Earth about alien civilizations. She knew things that would shock most humans. She knew that the Galactic Council was made up of over 400 species. She knew that they had been spacefaring for millions of years while humans were still living in caves. She knew that they considered any species less than 10,000 years into space travel to be primitive and unworthy. But she also knew their secrets. The aliens were not careful with their communications. Why would they be? They believed no one was listening. They sent messages across the stars without encryption, talking about politics and wars and trade deals. They discussed their military strategies openly. They shared blueprints for weapons and ships on channels they thought were private. Lisa recorded everything. Her team translated everything. And slowly, over decades, Earth learned. Kevin Park was a young scientist when Project Silence began. Now he was the director of Earth's most advanced research facility, hidden deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. His job was simple but enormous. He took the technology that Lisa intercepted and figured out how to build it. The first breakthrough came 12 years after first contact. A small alien probe had crashed in the Pacific Ocean, and Kevin's team recovered it. The technology inside was thousands of years ahead of anything on Earth. Most scientists said it would take centuries to understand. Kevin's team cracked it in 3 years. After that, the progress was rapid. They learned how to bend space for faster-than-light travel. They learned how to generate shields that could stop any weapon. They learned how to build reactors that could power a city with a device the size of a basketball. And they learned how to build ships. The shipyards were hidden in the shadows of Jupiter's moons. From Earth, they looked like mining operations. Thousands of workers lived there, building vessels in complete secrecy. No alien satellite ever spotted them. No council patrol ever came close enough to see Dot. By the year 2088, Earth had a fleet of over 3,000 warships. And no one in the galaxy knew they existed. General Amy Lawson commanded Earth's hidden military forces. She was a stern woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many training exercises to count. Her soldiers had never fought a real battle, but they had prepared for one every single day for 20 years. She often walked through the hangars of her secret base, looking at the ships her people had built. They were sleek and deadly, designed using the best alien technology combined with human creativity. The aliens had the knowledge, but humans had something else. They had the hunger of a species that had been told they were nothing. Amy believed in her soldiers. She believed they could face any enemy. But she also hoped they would never have to. Daniel Carter still sent his messages into space. Every week, he recorded a new transmission asking for dialogue. He knew the aliens would never respond. He knew they laughed at his words. Lisa had shown him the intercepted communications where council members mocked Earth's desperate attempts at contact, but he kept sending them anyway. It was important that the record showed humanity had tried. When the time came, no one could say that Earth had not asked for peace. President Scott Morrison was the fifth leader to serve since first contact. He was a calm man who believed in patience. Every month, he received reports from Project Silence. He knew about the fleet. He knew about the technology. He knew that Earth could now defend itself against any attack. But he also knew something else. He knew that the Council was discussing Earth again. After decades of ignoring the small blue planet, they had started talking about it in their private channels. Lisa delivered the translation personally. She flew from Horizon's edge to Earth, walked into the Situation Room beneath the mountains, and placed a document on the table. Daniel read the words slowly. His hands began to shake. The human infestation has been classified as a potential biological contaminant. The Vellani Dominion has proposed sterilization protocols. Preliminary vote approved. Final vote scheduled within one standard cycle. The room was silent. Everyone understood what those words meant. The galaxy had decided that humanity was not just primitive. They were a disease to be wiped out. Daniel looked at his colleagues. He saw Lisa's cold anger. He saw Kevin's quiet determination. He saw Amy's readiness for battle. And he saw the president's steady eyes. For 37 years, Earth had stayed quiet. They had listened to every insult. They had endured every mockery. They had built and prepared and waited. Now the waiting was over. The Galactic Council chamber on Volanthos Prime was older than human civilization. Its crystal walls had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Its polished floors had been walked by species that had conquered entire star systems. And its great circular hall held representatives from 400 different worlds. High Counselor Zorath sat at the center of this hall, elevated above all others. He was Vellani, a species that had dominated galactic politics for over 50,000 years. His body was tall and thin, covered in shimmering blue scales. 6 eyes sat on his elongated face, each one capable of seeing in different spectrums of light. When he spoke, the entire chamber listened. "We have a minor matter to address before we conclude today's session," Zorath announced. His voice was deep and carried easily across the vast space. The human situation. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled representatives. The humans were a common joke among council species. A young civilization that had barely left their own planet, yet constantly sent messages begging for attention. Representative Kelix of the Sindari Collective clicked her mandibles in what passed for laughter among her insectoid species. What have the little creatures done now? Sent another mathematical equation to prove their intelligence. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Zorath raised one slender hand for silence. The Biological Assessment Committee has completed its review of the Sol system. Their findings are concerning. The humans have demonstrated aggressive tendencies, territorial behavior, and a disturbing capacity for violence among their own kind. They have fought 2 global wars and continue to engage in smaller conflicts constantly. Typical primitive behavior, said Ambassador Threll of the Cathari Dominion. He was a massive creature, covered in thick gray hide and standing twice the height of any human. They will destroy themselves eventually. Why should we care? Because they might not destroy themselves fast enough, Zorth replied. The committee believes that within another century, humans may develop interstellar capability on their own, without our guidance or control. And a species this aggressive, spreading across the stars without council oversight. He let the implication hang in the air. The chamber grew quiet. Every representative understood the danger of an uncontrolled species expanding into the galaxy. History was full of examples of young civilizations that had caused chaos before they were brought under control. "What do you propose?" asked Kelix. Zora smiled, revealing rows of small, sharp teeth. "Sterilization. Clean and efficient. We send a fleet to Sol 3, eliminate the biological contamination, and allow the planet to recover naturally. In a few million years, perhaps a more suitable species will evolve." On Earth, Lisa Brennan watched the intercepted broadcast in real time. Her translation software worked quickly, converting the alien languages into English. She felt her blood run cold as she read the words appearing on her screen. They were not just ignoring humanity anymore. They were planning to exterminate them. She immediately sent a priority message to Earth. Within an hour, the most powerful people on the planet were gathered in the underground situation. Daniel Carter read the full transcript aloud. His voice remained steady, but everyone could see the tension in his shoulders. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "They called us a biological contamination," Kevin Park said quietly. "They're discussing our extinction like we're a pest problem." General Amy Lawson stood up from her chair. Her face was hard, her eyes sharp. "I've been preparing for this day for 20 years. My soldiers are ready. Our ships are ready. We can defend Earth, can we?" President Morrison asked. "We've never tested our technology in actual combat. Everything we have is based on what we've learned from them. What if we missed something? What if there are weapons they never discussed in their open communications?" "Then we will learn and adapt," Amy replied. "That's what humans do. That's what we've always done." Lisa spoke up from her seat at the end of the table. "I've been monitoring their military capabilities for 15 years. The fleet they're proposing to send is significant. Maybe 300 warships from the Villani alone, with support from the Sindari and Cathari. But it's not their full strength. They're treating this as a minor operation. Pest control, like they said. Because they think we have nothing," Daniel said. "They believe we're still at the same technological level as when they first contacted us. They have no idea what we've built." Kevin nodded slowly. "We've kept everything hidden. No test flights visible from space. No energy signatures that could be detected. As far as the Council knows, humans are still riding chemical rockets and struggling to reach their own moon." President Morrison looked around the table. He saw the faces of people who had dedicated their lives to this moment. People who had worked in secret, endured mockery from across the stars, and never gave up hope that humanity would one day stand equal among galactic civilizations. "What are our options?" he asked. Daniel stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. "We have 3 choices. First, we can try to communicate with them again. Beg for mercy. Show them we're not a threat. They've ignored every message we've ever sent," Lisa said. "They won't listen now. Second, we can try to evacuate. Send colony ships to other worlds before their fleet arrives. Save as many humans as we can." Amy shook her head. "We don't have enough ships for that. We built a military fleet, not a refugee fleet. We might save a few thousand people at most. Then that leaves the third option, Daniel said, turning back to face the room. We fight. We reveal everything we've built over the past 4 decades. We show them that the species they dismissed as primitive insects has teeth. The room was silent again. Everyone understood what this meant. War with the Galactic Council. War with civilizations that had been spacefaring for millions of years. War with an enemy that outnumbered them by billions. But they also understood the alternative. Extinction. President Morrison stood slowly. He was not a military man. He had never wanted war. But he was the leader of humanity, and humanity was facing annihilation. How long do we have? He asked. Lisa checked her notes. Based on their communications, the final vote will happen in 3 days. After that, they'll need about a week to assemble and dispatch the fleet. Travel time to Earth is approximately 12 days using their standard drives. 3 weeks, Morrison said. We have 3 weeks to prepare for the most important battle in human history. Amy Lawson straightened her uniform. My soldiers have been preparing for 20 years, sir. 3 weeks is more than enough. Daniel returned to his seat. For 37 years, he had been the voice of a planet that no one wanted to hear. He had sent messages into the void, hoping for a response that never came. He had believed, despite everything, that dialogue was possible. Now he understood the truth. Some species did not want to talk. They only wanted to dominate. And the only language they understood was power. Then let's show them, he said quietly. What happens when you push humanity too far? Admiral Zorath stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment. It was the largest warship in the Vellani fleet, nearly 2 miles long and armed with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Around him, 300 similar vessels moved through space in perfect formation. Behind them came the Sindari cruisers with their swarm missiles, and the Kethari bombers with their heavy plasma cannons. It was the largest sterilization fleet assembled in 3 centuries. Complete overkill for a primitive species that had barely discovered electricity a few generations ago. But that was the point. The Council wanted to send a message to the galaxy. Any species that showed dangerous tendencies would be eliminated before they could become a threat. No warnings. No second chances. Just swift, total annihilation. Zorath barely paid attention to the tactical displays. His officers had everything under control. This was not a battle. It was an extermination. The humans had no fleet, no planetary shields, no orbital defenses of any kind. They would probably try to launch some primitive nuclear weapons, which would burn up harmlessly against Vellani shields. And then it would be over. Entering the Sol system, his navigation officer reported. Target planet will be in range within 6 hours. Excellent, Zorath replied. He looked out the main viewing window at the stars ahead. Somewhere out there was a small blue world filled with creatures who thought they deserved a place in the galaxy. Soon, that world would be nothing but ash. On Earth, the final preparations were complete. President Morrison had addressed the planet in a broadcast that was watched by every human alive. He had explained the truth. For decades, the government had been preparing for this moment. A hidden fleet waited in the darkness of space, ready to defend humanity. The technology was advanced. The soldiers were trained. And the odds, while not good, were not hopeless. The planet had responded with remarkable calm. There was fear, of course. There was anger at the aliens who thought they could simply wipe out humanity. But there was also pride. Pride in what their species had accomplished in secret. Pride in the soldiers who were about to fight for their survival. Lisa Brennan stood on the bridge of her ship, the Defiant. It was one of the largest vessels in the human fleet, designed to serve as a mobile command center. Around her, Thousands of other ships waited in the shadows of Jupiter's moons, hidden behind the planet's massive bulk. She looked at her crew. They were young, most of them. They had trained for years, but had never faced actual combat. None of them had. But they were ready. She could see it in their eyes. "All ships, report status," she said into the fleet-wide channel. One by one, the ships responded. 3,200 vessels in total. Carriers, destroyers, frigates, fighters. Each one built with reverse-engineered alien technology, improved by human innovation. They were smaller than the Vellani ships, faster and more maneuverable. And they carried weapons the aliens had never seen before. Ryan Cole was the captain of a destroyer called the Starbreaker. He was 32 years old, born and raised in Texas, and he had wanted to be a pilot since he was 5 years old. When he learned about the secret fleet at age 18, he had volunteered immediately. Now, 14 years later, he was about to lead his ship into the first real battle in human history. "Cole," Lisa's voice came through his personal channel. "Your squadron will lead the first wave. Hit their flanks, draw their fire, and then fall back. Don't try to be a hero." "Understood, Commander," Ryan replied. He looked at his crew. 12 people who had become family over years of training. You heard the lady. Let's give them something to remember. The alien fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond Earth's moon. Admiral Zorath smiled as he saw the blue planet on his display. So small, so fragile. It would not take long. "Begin scanning for population centers," he ordered. "We'll start with their largest cities and work our way down." His tactical officer worked the controls for a moment, then stopped. His scales turned slightly pale. "Admiral, I'm detecting energy signatures in the outer system. Massive energy signatures. Near the gas giant." Zorath frowned. "Clarify." "Ships, Admiral. Thousands of them. They're coming out of hiding behind the planet's moons." For the first time in his long career, Zorath felt a chill run through his body. He looked at the display as the human fleet revealed itself. The primitives who had sent desperate messages for decades, begging for contact. The species his people had mocked and dismissed. They had ships. Real ships. Thousands of them. "Impossible," he whispered. Lisa opened a channel to the alien fleet. Her voice was calm and steady. "Attention Galactic Council forces. This is Commander Lisa Brennan of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You came here to exterminate what you called vermin. You came expecting no resistance. You were wrong." She paused, letting her words sink in across the void of space. "For 37 years, we listened to your insults. We heard you laugh at our attempts to communicate. We watched as you dismissed us as primitive, as insects, as contamination. And we stayed quiet. But we were not idle. We were building. We were preparing. And now you will see exactly what humanity is capable of." The human fleet moved forward. 3,000 ships against 300. But numbers were not everything. The Vellani ships were larger, their weapons more powerful. This would not be an easy fight. Admiral Zorath recovered quickly from his shock. He was a veteran of dozens of campaigns. He had faced unexpected situations before. "All ships, combat formation," he ordered. "Target the largest human vessels first. Show them that numbers mean nothing against Vellani technology." The first Vellani weapons fired, bright beams of energy crossing the distance between the fleets in seconds. They struck the leading human ships and did nothing. The beams splashed harmlessly against glowing shields. "They have our shield technology," the tactical officer said, his voice shaking. "They have everything. Weapons, drives, shields. They copied everything." Ryan Cole's destroyer dove through the enemy formation, firing as it went. The human weapons were different from standard Vellani designs. They had been modified, improved by decades of human engineering. The energy bolts hit harder and faster than anything the aliens expected. A Sindari cruiser exploded under concentrated fire. Then another. Then a Vellani destroyer. The battle raged for hours. The aliens fought back hard, using their experience and their more powerful individual ships. They destroyed dozens of human vessels. But for every human ship that fell, 3 alien ships went down with it. The human pilots were reckless, aggressive, unpredictable. They used tactics the aliens had never seen. They made sacrifices that no council species would consider. They fought like beings who had nothing to lose and everything to prove. Admiral Zorath watched his fleet crumble around him. The eternal judgment shook as human weapons pounded its shields. Half of his ships were gone. The Sindari were fleeing. The Cathari had been wiped out entirely. "Admiral, we need to retreat," his second officer said. "We can regroup and return with a larger force." Zorath looked at the tactical display. The human commander had been smart. She had positioned her fleet to cut off any escape route. They were surrounded. "There is no retreat," he said quietly. "We came to exterminate them. And they have exterminated us instead." An hour later, it was over. The Eternal Judgment drifted dead in space, its crew captured by human boarding parties. The rest of the Council fleet had been destroyed or disabled. Earth's sky, which had been threatened with fire and death, was clear. Lisa Brennan sat in her command chair, exhausted but triumphant. They had lost 400 ships, thousands of human lives. But they had won. Around the world, people watched the battle's conclusion. They saw the alien fleet destroyed. They saw their own ships victorious. And they understood that everything had changed. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was not weak. And humanity was not going to be exterminated by anyone. The news traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light. From relay station to relay station, from planet to planet, the message spread. The sterilization fleet sent to eliminate humanity had been completely destroyed. The primitive species from Sol 3 had revealed a hidden military force and won a decisive victory. On Valanthos Prime, the Galactic Council chamber was in chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for negotiations. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. High Councilor Vethel, who had replaced Zorath after his death, tried to restore order. But the fear in the chamber was too strong. For the first time in thousands of years, a species outside the Council had defeated a Council military operation. The implications were terrifying. Representative Calix of the Sindari stood at her podium, her mandibles clicking nervously. Just weeks ago, she had laughed at the humans. She had joked about sending them picture books. Now her species' fleet had been scattered, and human ships were patrolling near Earth with weapons that could match anything the Sindari possessed. "We must send everything we have," demanded Ambassador Thrall of the Cathari. His massive form trembled with rage. "Every ship in the Council fleet. Crush them before they become stronger. And lose everything?" Another representative shouted back. "We sent 300 ships. 300. And they destroyed them all. How many would we need to guarantee victory? 1,000? 10,000? And what happens to our own defenses while our fleets are away?" The argument continued, growing more heated by the minute. But across the galaxy, other species were watching. Species that had been conquered by the Council. Species that had been denied membership. Species that had been mocked and dismissed, just like humanity. They were watching, and they were thinking. On Earth, Daniel Carter prepared for the most important broadcast of his life. The recording studio was simple, just him and a camera. but the message would reach every corner of known space. Lisa's team had figured out how to access the Council's communication networks. Whatever Daniel said would be heard by trillions of beings. He took a deep breath and began. To all species of the Galactic Council and beyond. My name is Daniel Carter. I am the ambassador of the United Earth Government. For 37 years, I have sent messages into space, asking for dialogue, for recognition, for the basic respect that any intelligent species deserves. Those messages were ignored. They were mocked. They were treated as the desperate cries of insects begging for attention. Daniel paused, letting his words carry across the void. You called us primitive. You called us contamination. You voted to sterilize our planet, to wipe out 8 billion people because you considered us unworthy of existence. You sent a fleet to execute that decision. That fleet no longer exists. In the council chamber, every representative fell silent as Daniel's face appeared on their screens. His voice was calm, measured, but carried an undeniable weight. I want to make something clear. Humanity did not want this war. We never wanted conflict with any species. When we first received your message, cataloging us as primitive and unworthy, we were hurt. We were confused. But we did not give up hope. We believed that if we could just prove ourselves, if we could just find a way to communicate, you would accept us. Dr. Kevin Park watched the broadcast from his laboratory. Around him, the scientists who had worked for decades to reverse engineer alien technology sat in quiet attention. They had given humanity the tools to survive. Now they would see if survival was enough. So we stayed quiet, Daniel continued. We listened to your communications. We learned your languages, your politics, your technology. We watched as you discussed us in your councils, laughing at our attempts to reach out. We heard every insult, every joke, every dismissive comment about the pathetic humans and their primitive world. General Amy Lawson stood in the command center of Earth's defense network. On screens around her, the human fleet held position in orbit. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The Council could send more ships. They could try again. But they would not catch humanity off guard a second time. And we prepared, Daniel said. We built ships in secret. We trained soldiers who had never known anything but peace. We developed technology that matched and sometimes exceeded what you had created over millions of years. We did all of this not because we wanted to fight, but because we understood that the galaxy would never accept us willingly. We would have to earn our place. We would have to prove that humanity could not be ignored. On worlds across the galaxy, beings of every species watched the human ambassador speak. Some felt fear. Some felt anger. But many felt something else. They felt respect. The fleet you sent to exterminate us was the most powerful force your council had assembled in 3 centuries. We destroyed it in 6 hours. Not because we are stronger than you. Not because we are more advanced. We destroyed it because we are determined. Because when humanity is pushed, we push back. Because every human soldier who flew into that battle knew exactly what was at stake and chose to fight anyway. President Morrison watched from his office, surrounded by advisors and generals. The world was holding its breath. Everything depended on what happened next. So here is our message to the Galactic Council and to every species watching this broadcast. Humanity will not be exterminated. We will not be conquered. We will not be bullied or threatened or dismissed as primitive insects. We have proven that we can defend ourselves. Now we want to prove something else. Daniel's voice softened slightly, taking on a tone that was almost gentle. We want to prove that we can be partners, that we can contribute to galactic civilization, that the species you dismissed as worthless actually has something to offer. We have art and music and stories that no other species has ever created. We have ideas and innovations that come from our unique perspective. We have a history of overcoming impossible odds that stretches back thousands of years. Lisa Brennan watched from her ship, still in orbit around Earth. Her crew stood around her, exhausted but proud. They had fought the battle of their lives. Now they would see if it had been worth it. We do not want revenge for how you treated us. We do not want to conquer or dominate or destroy. We want only what we have always wanted since the first day of contact. A seat at the table. A voice in galactic affairs. The chance to prove that humanity deserves to exist alongside every other species in this vast and wonderful universe. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes intense and sincere. The choice is now yours. You can send more fleets. You can try to finish what you started. But know this, we will fight every single time. We will defend our home and our people with everything we have. And the cost of destroying humanity will be far greater than you can imagine. Or you can choose a different path. You can accept that you underestimated us. You can recognize that humanity is not a threat to be eliminated, but a partner to be welcomed. You can finally give us the respect we have asked for since the beginning. He paused one final time. We stayed quiet for 37 years. We will not be quiet anymore. The question now is, will you listen? The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings sat in silence, processing what they had just witnessed. The primitive humans had spoken, and for the first time, the galaxy was listening. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Earth. The galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Vellani Dominion, once the most powerful force in the Galactic Council, had fallen into internal conflict. The loss of their fleet had exposed weaknesses that other species had long resented. Worlds that had been under Vellani control for centuries were now demanding independence. The species that had ruled the Council for 50,000 years was crumbling from within. Other changes were happening too. Species that had never spoken up before were now finding their voices. The Relkai, a peaceful civilization that had been denied Council membership for 2,000 years, had sent a message of congratulations to Earth. The Varth, who had been conquered by the Sindari generations ago, had begun a quiet resistance movement. Everywhere, beings who had been told they were not worthy were looking at what humanity had accomplished and wondering if they could do the same. On Earth, life was slowly returning to normal. The fleet remained on alert, but the immediate threat had passed. The Council was too divided to launch another attack. And even if they tried, everyone knew what would happen. Daniel Carter stood in his office at the United Nations building in New York, the same building where he had first heard the alien message 37 years ago. He was an old man now, his hair gray and his face lined with the stress of decades. But his eyes were sharp and his spirit was unbroken. A message had arrived that morning. The Galactic Council was requesting a formal meeting. Not to threaten, not to demand. To negotiate. The negotiations took place on a neutral space, stationed in an uninhabited system between Earth and Council space. Daniel led the human delegation. With him were Lisa Brennan, Kevin Park, and a team of diplomats and scientists who had spent their careers preparing for this moment. Across the table sat Representative Kellix of the Sindari. She was not the same arrogant creature who had joked about human intelligence just months ago. Her mandibles clicked nervously as she read from a prepared statement. The Sindari Collective formally apologizes for past characterizations of your species, she said. We were wrong to dismiss humanity as primitive. We were wrong to support the sterilization proposal. We request peaceful relations and the opportunity to begin again. Daniel nodded slowly. He felt no satisfaction in her humiliation. She was just one representative of a much larger system that had failed humanity. We accept your apology, he said. Earth has never desired conquest or revenge. We only ever wanted one thing. And what is that? A seat at the table. A voice in galactic affairs. The basic dignity you afford to species you consider worthy. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. Every detail was argued over, every point carefully considered. But in the end, the outcome was never really in doubt. The Council had no choice. Humanity had proven itself, and there was no way to undo that. The final ceremony took place on Volantos Prime itself, in the same chamber where the vote to exterminate humanity had been approved. 400 species watched as Daniel Carter walked to the podium reserved for new members. He looked around at the assembled representatives. Some had tried to kill his people. Some had laughed at humanity's suffering. Some had simply ignored Earth as if it did not exist. Now they were all watching him with a mixture of fear, respect, and curiosity. 37 years ago, Daniel said, humanity received a message from the stars. We were told that we had been cataloged, classified as primitive, and denied any place in galactic civilization. We were told not to attempt contact again. He paused, letting his words echo through the ancient chamber. We did not accept that verdict. We could not accept it, because humanity has never believed that our worth is determined by others. We have always believed that we could grow, improve, and prove ourselves. That is what we have done. High Counselor Vethel, who had replaced the fallen Zorath, stepped forward. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was formal and respectful. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, the species known as humanity is hereby granted full membership in this body. They will have all rights and responsibilities of any council species. Their voice will be heard equally among all others. Daniel bowed slightly. Thank you, High Counselor. Humanity looks forward to contributing to galactic peace and prosperity. He took his seat among 400 species. The first human to ever hold this position. The representative of a world that had been silent for so long. On Earth, the news was celebrated in every city and every town. People gathered in the streets, in parks, in their homes, watching the ceremony. For the first time in human history, they were not alone. They were part of something bigger than their small blue planet. Lisa Brennan watched the broadcast from her apartment in Seattle. Her daughter, 5 years old and curious about everything, sat on her lap. Mommy, what are those creatures? Those are aliens, sweetheart. They live on other planets, very far away. Are they nice? Lisa thought about the question. It was complicated. Some of those species had wanted to kill every human being. Others had simply not cared. But things were different now. Some of them are nice, she said. Some of them are still learning to be nice. But we're going to try to be friends with all of them. That sounds good, her daughter said simply. Lisa smiled. Children made everything seem so simple. Maybe that was the right approach. Kevin Park received a personal message from a Vellani scientist, one of the researchers whose work he had studied for decades, back when he was reverse engineering alien technology in secret. The scientist wanted to collaborate, to combine human creativity with Vellani knowledge and see what they could create together. Kevin agreed immediately. This was what he had always hoped for. Not war, but partnership. Not theft, but exchange. General Amy Lawson retired from active duty. She had spent her entire career preparing for a battle that had only lasted 6 hours. Now that battle was over, and a new generation would take her place. A generation that would hopefully never have to fight again. Daniel Carter returned to Earth after the ceremony. He stood at the window of his office, looking out at the city that had seen him grow from a young aide to an old ambassador. So much had changed. So much had been sacrificed, but they had done it. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. A message arrived on his console. It was from a species he had never heard of. from a world so far away that its light would not reach Earth for 1,000,000 years. They had seen his broadcast, the one he had sent after the battle, and they wanted to talk. Daniel smiled. 37 years of silence. And now, everyone wanted to talk to humanity. He sat down at his desk and began composing a reply. The first of many conversations with the galaxy. The first steps of a journey that would last forever. Earth had stayed quiet. But now, at last, Earth had found its voice, and the galaxy would never forget the sound.